we're not doing a good job in medicine. Oh my goodness, I treat just patients every day with invisible illnesses. And this is Lyme disease, mold, perimenopause, menopause, diabetes. I mean, all of these things that people suffer with.
Welcome to the Invisible Encourage Show, a production of the Invisible Disabilities Association. Join us as we explore the stories and topics shaping the lives of those with invisible disabilities and all who support them. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Jess Stainbrook here with the Invisible Disabilities Association on another Invisible Encourage podcast. And really excited today because we're having a conversation with one of our board members, Jen Flagar. Well, hello, Jen. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm good, Jess. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. Really excited to have this conversation because there's so much of your background that has played into you joining the board and obviously some personal things with invisible disabilities yourself, but just, give us a little background. I mean, you're a double board certified physician. I mean, there's a whole lot of credentials that I think would be helpful for people to understand as we get going here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I started off wanting to go into medicine, conventional medicine, and I did. I went to Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine for medical school. And I knew I wanted to be a DO, a doctor of osteopathic medicine. When I was in college, I shadowed a lady that was in my gospel choir course. And she was like, yeah, I'm a DO. This is what we do different. We see the body more as a whole. The body can heal itself, that kind of stuff. And I'm like, wow, that's cool. So I went and I applied to DO schools. And then I ended up deciding, I thought I always wanted to do family practice, but I actually decided to do emergency medicine. I wanted more shift work. I knew I wanted a family. That kind of shifted when my nephew was born and I met him. Knew I wanted to be that motherly role. And I really liked ER. I like the fact that people came to us very, vulnerable. I mean, when you're at the ER, you're very stressed, going through a lot, and I really enjoyed that empathy that I could have and really impact people. So then, while I was in medical school, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and honestly, I was tired. I was struggling with thyroid problems in high school. My senior year, I gained a lot of weight because it was like a few things. Like I was started on birth control to regulate my period. While they found out I had a thyroid nodule, it was Hashimoto's an autoimmune disease the whole time, no doubt. So I was suffering and, it was invisible. No one really knew why I was suffering, what I was going through. It was stressful when your hormones are all off and you feel miserable and you're gaining weight, you look inflamed. I mean, I just looked puffy from basically high school until well, residency really. So it's very interesting because now I look at women and I'm like, oh, I bet you they have an autoimmune disease and they don't even know. And I think that's the hardest thing is no one even figured it out until they were doing a biopsy of the nodule in medical school. So fast forward, I was told there was nothing I could do about my Hashimoto's. It was an autoimmune disease that you just deal with. The thyroid destroys itself. So I was like, okay, that's what the doctors say. Went through conventional medicine training where we are trained to look at the symptoms and then diagnose it and treat it with medication. Okay. Now, DO school is a little different because we try to see the body more as a whole, but even DO school education is heavily tainted with pharmaceutical companies' influence. So then I was out in the real world as an attending in the ER. I also had my first son, Declan, and he had this diaper rash that wouldn't go away. So I started eliminating things from my diet because I was breastfeeding him. I eliminated gluten and I had never felt better. I wasn't puffy, felt amazing. And then I'm like, oh, I can reverse my Hashimoto's. So that kind of all fell into place where I realized, food in our diet really can make a difference. And then after that, I wanted to go back and do a fellowship in integrative medicine. Now, that was also what was driving that was me working in the ER and just seeing people in the ER for like acute illnesses, yes, but usually most of them were from chronic disease. So heart disease, chronic, that's from chronic metabolic problems. Just all these sad things that I'm like, wow, we're not doing a good job in medicine. It's just sick care. So that led me to integrative medicine. And then, oh my goodness, I treat just patients every day with invisible illnesses. And this is Lyme disease, mold, perimenopause, menopause, diabetes. I mean, all of these things that people suffer with and it affects them every day. I was there. I used to be tired. When I was going through my Hashimoto's and post-surgery, like I could barely stay awake to study for medical school. So I get it. And I just think we need to talk more about these invisible disabilities because when we talk and share our story, someone gets hope, and there's something to say when you're not like suffering on your own, like you're not going through it alone. So now I see a lot of women with hormone problems, Hashimoto's, Lyme, mold, all the things. Breast implant illness is a big one that I am very passionate about. So it's come full circle, and I know that I went through these hard times and trials so I can be where I'm at now and advocate for those people that aren't getting what they need from the conventional medicine model, or even give them the courage to say, "Hey, I think something deeper is going on," and keep digging for that. So that's a little bit about like the quick story about what brought me to the IDA board and just to really speak out about invisible disabilities and illnesses.
Yeah, well, thanks. That's a great explanation. My goodness, what a journey. I mean, it's your practice in Healthy by Dr. Jen. You really do focus on kind of root cause medicine and the holistic side. And so my question really is, how does this approach benefit patients who have spent years with this diagnosis with an invisible disability that traditional tests might miss?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you know, Jess, like people are told in the conventional system that they cannot get better, you know, and that's just not true. Now, the only thing that's hard is a lot of the times it does take resources, financial resources outside the insurance model. And it's frustrating because you're paying for insurance every month. And you're like, well, I want to use that. But you're still having copays and then you're wasting your time getting there. And I'll have patients still see their specialists. I'll have them get second opinions. I sent someone to HEMONC and to dig deeper on something, and it really changed a trajectory for her family, her siblings, and her kids because it was a genetic thing going on. So I think that there's a time and a place for conventional medicine, but we need to think of conventional medicine like we think of car insurance. So conventional medicine and insurance, it's for an emergency. So you don't expect just like your car insurance to pay for your gas or your oil change, right? Like that would be kind of ridiculous, right? Well, that's how I feel like it is for insurance in the insurance model. We shouldn't expect it to keep us running, to keep us feeling vibrant and healthy, or to dig deeper into root causes. And it's actually really heartbreaking because I've seen stories of people, pushed to, taking their own life because they were so overwhelmed and no one was helping them and they were gaslit and they were told it was just POTS and no one was looking for a root cause. And this happened like this year and I told my husband, I'm like, I just need to pray over this and see what the Lord wants me to do. There are so many low-hanging fruit, easy ways to help people that are suffering out there in silence. And I don't know. There has to be a better way. I really think too, post-pandemic, there's a lot more of, autoimmune conditions, a lot more people that have these chronic illnesses like fibromyalgia or long haul. And I get it. I mean, they can barely make it through a day, I bet. And I see patients like this. So I just think that they need to have people telling them, like, don't give up hope. And also, I think we also have to talk about like when you go to a doctor and you get a diagnosis, that becomes part of your identity. And it's almost like a medical hex. And you need to break that. Like the Lord wants us to be healthy and in homeostasis, right? And I know for me, when I was going through this in high school, I had like a lot of like depression, anxiety, because some of it was spiritual, I bet, but also because my thyroid was off. And I think my mold exposure, that had to do with it. So I was recycling estrogens and more estrogen dominant. So then they just put you on more medication, birth control, and then that made me have really bad PMS symptoms, right? So this trajectory, I look back and I'm like, this does not need to happen to anyone. We need to pause and say, we're not deficient in medications. It's usually our environment or something wrong in our gut, something that's causing this. So I think it's beautiful when we can talk about, like, hey, this happened to me. These are some of the steps that help me, even though it might not work for everyone the same because we're all so different, but just having an open conversation and sharing different things. And there's also when we look at invisible disabilities, there's stuff that's genetic too that people are struggling with. And it might be a rare disease. And just to know that there's other people out there, or to let people know around you, or kids, if they're struggling with something, like ADHD, or just, my son diagnosed with PANS and PANDAS from a mold injury. So just I talk about it with people. I'm like, yeah, he's like difficult today. He's having a hard day because he has some inflammation in his brain that we are still healing from this mold exposure. So it's not like we can't, heal. And some people, that healing journey might take a couple years, might take 10 years, it might take their whole life, moving slowly and improving every day. So just bringing that awareness and letting people know they're not alone. We all struggle in this world. We live in a broken world, and bringing more awareness to that. And I really like what Ida is doing with bringing awareness, whether it's, at airports or having a badge or on your license, because not everyone understands unless you are living through it. So just bringing that awareness to, you know, I think it would be great to have awareness at hospitals too, but airports, get that extra help, or, the police officers and that training that Ida's working on. It's really going to help impact. And then also there's medical ID cards that Jess is showing, that is just help. So there's one that is a medical and one's a disability ID. So if you are one of those people that, like, say, has, long haul or chronic fatigue, and you need to, park closer, or you need more assistance, that people know that. Because even when, like, I was struggling with the Hashimoto's and I looked inflamed, like, people would look at me and they think I'm just normal. I was just fighting through medical school for a couple months until my thyroid labs got normalized. And people wouldn't know that. And even I look back, like, I tell people, like, I have more energy in my 40s than I did in my 20s because I was able to reverse my Hashimoto's and heal. And it is a journey. But back then, you almost like, I know when someone would recognize my scar that I had, I would almost be like, oh, good. Like, now we can talk about like what I went through and what I'm going through. But not everyone has that. There's a lot of people that are struggling out there and they have no physical symptoms, even. Not even, they're not even overweight, or they don't even have a limp. They are just looking normal and they're struggling internally. And my approach is faith-based too. So we also, we look to Jesus for help with that. Because like I was said before, the enemy can put lies in your brain, and he's done that for me too. And if we give him permission to call us names and say those things, or, say you're always going to be tired, or, just get in your head because you're home alone because you can't go somewhere because you have no energy. Well, that's a whole nother layer. So that the faith-based approach for me, it's really moved the needle with a lot of my patients that are suffering from certain conditions to help give a more positive outlook while they're healing and working on their health.
Yeah, that is certainly a wonderful approach that
Mhm.
I subscribe to as well. But it does bring up a question for me, and I would say that in your clinical experience, like what's the first thing that happens in the patient's healing process when they actually feel visible finally, and they hear that from their doctor? Like, how's that look?
Yeah. I think they feel like a relief. So specifically, I work with a lot of women in perimenopause and menopause, and I think it is a huge invisible disability, invisible illness, because their hormones are really causing problems, really causing symptoms, and they don't look like anything's going on, but they are struggling. Sometimes it's anxiety out of nowhere. They're not sleeping. I mean, if you don't sleep for a couple days, well, you go crazy, like you feel crazy. So just like recognizing them and saying, hey, your symptoms point to something, they mean something, you're going through this change in your life. Or say, oh gosh, a really good case. I saw a patient and I thought it would be easy. I thought, she had just gained weight, right? And couldn't stop. And I'm like, oh, it's probably just hormonal. This we'll get it fixed. Well, she had tried some hormones and she had gotten worse. So I went through her history and she had had a mold exposure back in college. And I don't think I think her body compensated until it didn't. I mean, she would not eat anything all day and still gain weight. And for me, I still think that's in the invisible like category because no one knows what she's going through and they're judging her and saying, "Oh, she just doesn't, she just sits at home and eats all day." And that's not true. So we did the testing for mold and it came back super high, and just to see and to talk to her, and she just like she knew it wasn't her. Like she knew, she just like was told that she just had to diet harder or whatever. And when she knew, like, oh my gosh, yeah, it isn't my fault. Like this is something that is in my body that we need to remove, that was colonized. And we got that out and supported her. And I told her, like, this is not your fault. Like this is something else that's off. It's not something that you're doing. Because I think that there is a lot of self-blame when we get a disease, like when I had an autoimmune disease, like, you feel like defeated and you feel like, oh, why me? And you just don't understand. And a lot of these diseases are, from poor gut health. There's things that we need to have an integrative and functional approach to have someone else look at it to start moving towards healing. And when I work with these women and I just acknowledge their symptoms, acknowledge that they feel this way, and that I'm not going to label it just as depression, anxiety, or even like you're not trying hard enough, all these things that people are told, they just feel so much relief. Like you can just feel like they have weight off their shoulders because they're being listened to. And I hate that the conventional medicine system is like this. I hate that it's just, they see you for 5 minutes and they throw medication out at you and you leave. And I think really what this community needs is just people to listen to them and acknowledge that they're going through something and have someone on their team. And I feel like it's just not like a team approach. I mean, it's interesting. Like I have a patient that has lupus and been working with her for a few years. It was actually a mold problem. And she came to me because she wanted to get off her hydroxychloroquine, which was helpful during the pandemic, her being on it, but she wanted to get off of it. And we worked really hard. We were balancing hormones, getting rid of the mold, working on her stress, and she's in remission. All her markers look beautiful. And her rheumatologist was like, "Oh, this is great. Like, wow, like not like how'd you do this?" Because he like didn't want to take her off the meds. He was like kind of mad about it. He's like, he knows me. I think I've met him before too. And I'm like, wouldn't we all just like want to do this? But she's just so happy. Like she's been dealing with this, for a decade and just has felt kind of shame about it and just like and scared, like, am I gonna are my kidneys going to get damaged? Am I going to lose my eyesight? So, I think me just telling her, hey, it's not your fault. I think there's a root cause. Let's keep working hard at this. And then me saying that, I think does more than any medication could, right? So I think that our brains are so powerful. And yeah, I was so happy for her. So a lot of stories like that of just relief. In sharing their story too with someone that actually cares and listens and has more than 5 minutes. So,
It sounds like you're basically helping people reclaim their identity. I mean, my
yeah.
goodness. Well, and that kind of fits in with our 2026 theme of the invisible no more concept,
Mhm.
right? I mean, and
Yeah.
I guess it would be well, and your book goes into that. I mean, you wrote the well, explain that a little bit too, because you have like this 28-day path and some other things that
Yeah.
and you've talked about how science meets faith, but tell us a little bit about the book and that part of the journey.
Yeah, so the book is The Perimenopause Reset, and you can go to drjenbook.com or it's back on Amazon. I just like the Lord told me to write this book to self-publish to get it out. And it's 28 days. People like plans, so it does come with a 28-day plan where you could go week by week. And it's based on the women's cycle too. I love our rhythms we have because so like Jess, you're the same every day. Your hormones are the same every day. But women, we are different every single day of our 30-day cycle, 28, 30-day cycle. And I hate how the media, the news, when we think of a women's menstrual cycle, we think negative. And I just hate that. I think that's super ick. I think that it's a beautiful rhythm, and I say like we were told in Genesis that we would have painful childbirth. We were not told we would have a painful period every single month. And the manufacturer companies, whatever, like they make money off of that, off of women having miserable heavy periods. I remember, the commercial when I was growing up was like, Midol makes it all go away. I mean, yeah, it's just, and then it gets even worse. The feminine products are bleached and scented and causing further problems. So, yeah, and even women like suffering with really heavy periods and cramping. I mean, they can't leave their couch with their kids and, be a mom and stuff. So, the super passion of mine, like perimenopause. I mean, this could happen in your early 30s up to your 50s. It's the time before the cessation of your cycles, which is menopause. And this is driven a lot by cortisol and stress too. And another thing I realized, like speaking at different events and seeing all of these women, is that there is a piece missing, and that is faith, and that is Jesus, reading the Bible, being in the Word. So that is part of my book. There's a devotion. I talk about everything from my battle with New Age and leaving New Age, like yoga and stuff. And when I got bullied, and that was really hard on me. And the Lord used all of these things for good. So spending, that time where we're meditating, which we know meditation is good for us, but not emptying our mind, but filling it with the word and positive things, because if we don't fill our mind with good things, the bad negative things are going to come in. And I hate to say it, but I mean, the devil's going to kick us when we're down. So if you're dealing with a chronic illness right now, there's no doubt in my head that you are getting attacked with words that are not from God, that are negative, right? Like, you're blah blah blah, you're fat, you're ugly, like you're tired, you're never going to get better. All of these things, like it's happened to all of us. So, I think we need to kind of like, it does come down to identity. And for me, it's, my identity being in Jesus. It's not my disease. It's not even my title, like doctor or mother, right? So my passion is to just help women and husbands. You're not off the hook. I mean, they should really understand what a woman is going through. Um, you see so much happen in perimenopause for women. A lot of divorces happen, a lot of just like sad stuff. I mean, I know that before I went on progesterone during my luteal phase, and I talk about this in the book, how to balance hormones more, that I was just getting very irritable, in my cycle and just you're on edge more. And that's because our hormones are declining as we age. So there's natural things we could do. There's bioidentical hormones we can do. There's a lot of things we can do. But the book specifically kind of puts it all together so it makes sense. Because I truly believe that to understand what we're going through, we do have to understand the science a little bit so we can tweak our day to day, especially as women, because we're different in different parts of our cycle. So, and also a lot of the things I talk about in the book, like blood sugar balance, that is going to help you prevent, coming in and seeing me in the emergency room, right? Because I don't want, I want to like work in the ER and not see anyone there unless they have like a cut or a broken bone. Like, I don't want to see all these chronic illnesses anymore because those are really hard to. But yeah, I mean, I just love that this can give hope to women that are struggling out there right now.
Yeah, well, I sure do appreciate that perspective, and it's important for the women to feel lifted up in the conversations and the
Yeah.
context of not just the advocacy for, but the healthcare side of it that you're providing.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for doing that. That's awesome.
Of course.
Well, let me move a little bit into the kind of the board vision, and as somebody who's on the board, and how does the I am invisible no more theme really influence your goals and in the terms of healthcare advocacy and helping others?
Yeah. Well, I would love, and one thing that we're trying to do is get more like bigger influencers, like maybe a big influencer on the board. So if anyone out there can pray for that, I think that would be great because it is all about awareness. I'm trying to talk with someone right now to get on the board who's going through infertility, and this is becoming so common. The amount of, I've had a few patients that dealt with infertility and, they have babies now, and that's amazing. But the shame behind some of these things, and I think that's why it needs to be invisible no more, because I think like when we feel invisible, we feel shame. And that is not what we want. And it goes back to the Bible. Like we need to have light on the darkness. And if you think of like being invisible, you think of being like, in the dark, alone, right? You're invisible. No one sees you. I mean, that is what the enemy wants. He wants to prowl and devour those people that are alone and isolated. And like when you're struggling with a disease that like no one can see and a disability that no one can see, they it's hard because unless you open up with them about it, they are going to think that you're acting a certain way, because of them or take offense or they're like, whatever, they're going to judge it. But if you are invisible no more, if you stand up and say, I'm bringing light on this, and this is why I'm so open with any of my struggles, because if I am open about it, then other people are going to be like, oh, like I'm going to talk about this too. Like we're bringing light to it. Like nothing needs to be a secret, you know? And I think that that is really important. And that's why I'm pretty much very I'm vulnerable very fast, right? I'm just like I just like lay it out. Like if you want to know something, I'll tell you. I'll tell you all my childbirths one. I'll tell you about my last cycle. I don't care. But I think that if we don't talk about it, then it stays invisible, it stays dark. And we just need to shine light on it. Like this is not going to do anything. And the other thing is like you might start by just finding like a counselor, maybe a pastor or elder at your church, a really good friend, and just start there. You know, it could be just as interesting. I was just speaking at a conference, a Seeking Whole Health conference, and during the women's health panel that I was on, someone brought up pelvic floor problems with women. And this is when the pelvic floor feels heavy, or we're getting parts like coming down, right? Or we're having urinary problems. I mean, this is like a very vulnerable topic. And it was so great that this woman brought it up and shared because the panel was able to give her thoughts and ideas that we've dealt with. There was like two doctors on the board, a midwife and like a pelvic floor therapist. So we were able to share like and give her hope, like, hey, like we go through these things. But I mean, especially, there's all sorts of, there's things for men too that like they're dealing with things or changes to their body and they don't want to talk about it. And then all of that comes the shame, the guilt. You think something's wrong with you. And no, we just need to go out there and talk about it. And it doesn't need to be on social media or a podcast, but we do need to start talking about it and not feel invisible. Because when we tell one person about what we're struggling with, our health, and what they can't see, they probably want to know so they can pray for you and help you. But if it's invisible, if you're carrying that weight, that shame, that is not, it's not going to help anyone, okay? And what is hard for me sometimes, I'll admit, is asking for help. I'm the worst at that. I don't know if anyone else. So, like, here's my thing. I'm like, if I'm asking for help, I've told my kids this before because my husband travels a little bit for work, and I'm like, if I've had to tell it a few times, and now they just do the things like if I ask them, my older kids, but I'm like, if I have to ask you guys for help, that that's like hard for me to do. So you should probably help me. So I keep asking for help instead of trying to do everything myself. So, yeah, I think when it's not sharing burden too, because none of us should hold on to burden anyway. We should give it, and there's lots of Bible verses about that. Your burden is light. So just start sharing. Like I challenge anyone listening that is dealing with anything, and you could think it's so little. You could be like, oh, I have this little umbilical hernia from having kids because I have a little one like that. It could be something so small that you're dealing with that is stressing you out or, making you not live your life to the fullest or you're carrying that load. It could be something super chronic, like you've been dealing with chronic Lyme or chemical sensitivities, or you can't go anywhere where there's EMFs. It could be something like so big or so small, but you need to just tell people why. Like this is why I can't go to your house because you have Glade plugins. Or, I just think that we need to give people a chance to recognize that we're going through something because I think people do want to help and recognize it. So we need to start declaring that we're not invisible, that this exists and we need to talk about it more.
Yeah, I think you're basically, the ability to share stories really does break that cycle of
Yeah.
invisibility and it's okay to rely on others for whether it's emotional help or physical
Mhm.
help or something like that. So yeah, appreciate that perspective. Well, my question now is, is there anything I haven't asked you in the context of kind of your expertise and being part of the IDA board and stuff that you wanted to share? Before I get to the close here?
Yeah, so something funny about me is we're trying to, do a little mini farm up here and I'm gonna start sharing more about that on my YouTube. It's Integrative Doctor Mom and I try to share on my my Instagram, it's just been very humbling, trying new things. And we just before, that's why I was rushing into this podcast. I was like, sorry, Jess, but we have like a turkey that like hatched. It was piping out of its shell. And then it had been 48 hours. I'm like, we got to get it out. And it was like pus all in there. So I have my 10-year-old up there giving it some electrolytes, and it's under a heat lamp and it smells, but we'll see. So that's way having animals in farm life is just like way like there's a lot of things that can go wrong.
Oh yeah, the whole
So I'm
we
like,
did the we became the suburban chicken family. Like we actually went
nice.
to the HOA and got it approved. So you
Yay.
can't have roosters, but you can have
Right.
four chickens. And so
Yes.
we did that basically, living in suburbia in a neighborhood so that our kids could have that experience of, every day you go out and get the eggs and the chickens eat leftovers and blah blah blah. Well, the interesting
Yeah.
thing, I mean, from the biblical standpoint, I thought this was phenomenal. Chickens they lay eggs 6 days a week,
Oh,
and they have a
oh,
rest day. So we had
yeah.
three Sunday chickens and a Tuesday chicken,
That
where
is so funny. They
it was
pick their
real.
own Sabbath.
They have their own day of rest, and I'm like, how interesting that
Oh,
that
that's
that
so
works out.
cool.
But well, what a blast that you're doing that kinds of thing. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Great
it's
for your
it's
kids.
fun. Yeah, it's good. And then new on the horizon, I felt really called to start a hormone health coach certification. So that the first cohort starts in May, and then the next one after that will start in September. So my goal is to equip and teach and mentor women that want to be health coaches to other women. And so that's just something I felt called to do because I'm getting to that point in my career where I want to teach more and still see patients, but I want it to be a ripple effect, especially with faith-based medicine, because I was led astray, as I talk about that in my book. And I'm very honest about that. I don't think it was good for me. It gave me a good testimony, but yeah, I kind of got led off track. So yeah, so that's another thing that is coming up new. So I'm super excited to mentor some women to help coach other women through hormone problems.
Well, that's amazing, and I do appreciate you joining me today. Just to have a conversation, and
Yeah.
so I usually ask this last question. I mean, this is called the Invisible Encourage Show because it takes immense strength to navigate what others can't see, right? And
Yeah.
so my question is, on the days when symptoms are heavy or the road feels long, everything's just kind of weighing upon you, what gives you the courage to make it through the day?
Yeah, so mine would be Jesus. So I just know that there will be suffering on earth, and if we're having a bad day, or when I was having, bad days or bad symptoms, or I'm still working through my health journey and trying to fix things, that we pray, and that we know that we're going through these things for a reason. It will be turned into good, and that the Lord is not withholding good from us. So even if someone listening, is really sick and they're at that really low point and no one gets it, I mean, you have a God that gets it, and he is always there and close to you.
Well, that's so awesome to hear. Well, I really do appreciate you coming today, and thank you for sharing your courage and your expertise and how you really do help people with that mix of faith and science. I think that's amazing. So thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and to our listeners, you know what? Your journey is seen, your story is valid, and in 2026, you are invisible no more. Thanks for joining us.